Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. You're going to have to do better than that. Good afternoon, everybody. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. I'm here to talk about the maximum value product mindset. But before I get into that, I wanted to spend some time and talk about the minimum viable product, which I think most people are more familiar with. So this is actually Frank Robinson. I stalked him on LinkedIn just to find his picture. But in 2001, he coined the phrase minimum viable product. And I think most people know minimum viable product. This is quite the iconic infographic. I've always had a little bit of a problem with it because I don't think it doesn't do minimum viable product enough justice. So I kind of added a product owner, product manager overlay to it to give people more of an idea of what this means. And it really is, don't build the car first, but you need to show the transition from a skateboard to a car. So it's really concentrating on the core features that you want to begin with, and then evolve over time, creating new versions as you go until you eventually get to where you need to. So there are many, many advantages to this. I mean, the first thing is you're building your product really quickly. You're measuring the results, through analytics, through customer feedback. You're learning from that, and you're iterating as you go. And that allows you to actually enhance and improve your product as you go, as opposed to going a very long time down the road before anybody actually sees anything. So to be clear, minimum viable product as a technique is fast, it's iterative, it's cost-effective, and you get a feedback loop. So it's all awesome stuff. But there are risks associated with it. The big one is that for minimum viable product to work, you do actually need to iterate on the software or the solution that you're working on. And that requires constant feedback from your end users as you go. The kind of contract with minimum viable product is that you are giving your end users a lower quality experience up front with the intent to build upon it as you go. And I think one of the major risks is that you can risk losing focus with your solution, and you never get to the car. You just end up kind of tuning the skateboard. In the world of video game development, it's kind of a tough thing as well, because in video games, we live in a fixed media world. From Donkey Kong Country 3 on a cartridge back in 1996, through to Epic Mickey all the way in 2010, we have to release on hardware. So there was no opportunity to iterate on what we did. To make matters even worse, in the world of video game development, a lot of the times you're dealing with fixed scope, fixed resources, and fixed schedule. And all of that combines to ask one really major question, which is, what is quality, and how do you get to that kind of qualitative experience? And through the courtesy of my good friend and ace photographer, Matt Anderson, we managed to sum it up in a picture, which I call 90s software development. And yes, I still have that swag, and that is mine. But this was software development in the 1990s, but it was also very much the kind of hours that you were working making software in the video game industry as well. So things get better. I actually moved from video games, so after Epic Mickey, I actually went to Rosetta Stone. And that's when I really got into the full swing of things with minimum viable product, with agile development, with analytics. And it was pretty awesome. But there was crossover in terms of the things that I'd learned from the gaming industry and the associated crazy project management that we went through. And as you can see from my time there, we actually managed to ship 5 different projects over 3 different time frames, but every single one of them either got featured by Apple or Amazon, and we also won awards for design quality as we went. So, with all of the different things that hit us every day, I'm here to talk about how we take all of those things together and synthesize it into the maximum value product. So my name is Paul Weaver, and I'm your Vice President of User Experience and Human Factors. I'm responsible for the clinical and quality of our solutions as pushed through my quite wonderful UX team. Now, some of you know me from a design standpoint, but what you probably don't know about me is that I actually spent about 5 years of my career in the world of project management, particularly at my time at Acclaim and IonStorm. And that project management has given me a unique insight into the world of software development and I think made me a stronger designer overall as well. So the key for maximum value product is that it's not just a methodology, it's not just another methodology, it's also a state of mind. And that starts with vision. And so with regard to vision, I actually pulled up some examples of previous games. And you can see here with Extreme G3, that's back in 2001, Fantastic Four 2005, that vision was driven by Word documents and a little bit of concept art. As we moved into 2007, 2008 with Epic Mickey, we started to add concept art into the equation to help show what the vision could be. But by the time we got to Rosetta Stone, the vision was actually fully usable prototypes of what the end experience could be, not just in terms of its visuals, but also interactive for the end user to really kind of touch, feel, and technical difficulties today. Touch, feel, and see what it was they were going to build. And I think it's really important to have a strong vision for anything that you're making. The first, for the team's benefit, is what exactly are we making? Who is going to benefit from it? Why does it make a difference in the marketplace? When does it need to launch by? And where and how can users access it? These are all really important questions, and there's a total crossover here from game development through to language learning and definitely in the world of healthcare IT. All of these are really good questions to ask yourself at the beginning of a solution. So going back to 2016, and a shout out to our consumer team, there'll probably be more than a few shout outs today, but they funded a card for us, a senior designer, and that senior designer back in 2016 was able to actually go through and create a complete vision of what a consumer application could be in the healthcare space, utilizing the rules and ideas that have come from one Cerner style and integrating that into it. This is really just sort of scratching the surface, I think, and there's more to be done here, but for a first test, I think it was really, really effective. And it's not just eye candy or visual information. You're actually getting something that helps your roadmap and your production team as you go as well. So again, back to the examples. So Extreme G3, Fantastic Four, Word documents with high-level milestones as to things that we needed to hit and know that we've kind of crossed the threshold and got things done. But by the time we'd gotten to Epic Mickey, the roadmap had gotten more and more complex. And I mean, that's the thing we all deal with software, is that it's getting more and more complex, and getting all of even the high-level roadmap in place is getting tougher and tougher. When we moved from Epic Mickey, which was on one platform, which we had to develop in 3 years, Epic Mickey 2, we had to complete in 2 years and on 7 different hardware platforms. And from a roadmap perspective, as you can see from this example, the complexity really went through the roof because we were actually balancing about 750 developers all around the world just to make a video game. But we succeeded. And you might look at that roadmap and say, well, that's a schedule, or it's getting close to it. I disagree. I think this example represents an old school schedule. So I don't know if there are any Microsoft project guys or gals in the room. Get a shout out? Thank you. So a Gantt chart for you in a design talk. Not bad. But as you can see from all of those lines on the right-hand side, this was old school project management. You'd get all of those different tasks, and a project manager would have to link them up. And it's incredibly time-consuming, and then as soon as you start developing your product, everything changes, because real life gets in the way, and you have to change. So rather than going to that level of detail, today we have roadmaps, and they come in various different shapes and forms and sizes. But we need to look at the vision along with the roadmap, and then look at things a slightly different. An example from Rosetta Stone. So take all of your people, everybody that's contributing to equals the number of people that you have. And depending on what point value system you're doing, so it's either 1 point equals 1 day, there's Fibonacci, there's power of 2, whatever it is. Points equal people times time. And across your product iteration, or quarter, or agile sprint, you have X amount of points you can dedicate to work. And that's that circle. And then the business comes in and says, hey, we need all of this. And of course it doesn't fit, because the asks and the requirements are huge. But how do we tackle this problem? And the bad example, I think, is, well, let's try and just get it all done in the sprint, which is not a good idea. As you can see from that example of features and points, you're basically eliminating about 2,500 points worth of effort, and you're going to have a lower quality iteration on your hands, and potentially angry clients as well. So we'll do it a slightly different way, and that is that the development team, with the vision, with the roadmap, work with the business, and essentially prioritize the work with the points that are allocated to it, and then look to make that fit within the quarter. And that allows the team to dedicate themselves to quality, and quality, at least in my opinion, is greater than quantity. And quite frankly, nobody remembers with fond memories the average project that shipped. That just doesn't happen. So vision, roadmap, design, and design thinking. And I'm here to tell you, in 2018, user experience is not a nicety, it's a necessity. The stakes have never been higher in terms of high-quality client experiences. And it's just as a quick refresher of UX, actually going back to the keynote talk this morning, which was super cool. Humans are not computers, and computers are not humans. They are highly emotional, highly subjective creatures, sometimes of habit, but we perceive things in very different ways. And computers only give you the output that's put in, and despite your best estimates and assumptions, unless you include UX in the mix, you can't really bridge that gap. Now, I want to give you an example from Epic Mickey, because Disney wanted us to utilize user research. And I said, well, the point of this, because I've been doing this a long time, I have a design, I have a huge engineering team, we have QA. Why would we do user research? Well, I'm going to show you a quick video. So, apologize for the. So this is the second room in the game, Epic Mickey. So we're introducing paint and thinner as a concept. So you can play around, there's no bad guys, you can get to paint things in. We have a cog, and you have to paint that in, and then the door opens, and you carry on your way. Super obvious, right? 23 seconds. Well, we took that to user research, and I sat behind the one-way glass and watched the kids play the game. And time passed. And then it really got uncomfortable. And then we got sort of angry, because clearly they brought in a bunch of idiots. And then we wanted to smash the glass. And then we went through the other stages that we kind of sucked. But we went back and said, wow, our assumptions are smashed. We need to embrace this. So forevermore, we utilize user research with the games that we made from then. Since Rosetta Stone, and fortunately for us, because we already have a great human factors team here at Cerner. And here are examples. They're ongoing today across the board. In-person user research studies. In the last year, we've pushed to incorporate a middleware tool called UserZoom, which now allows us to test our solutions remotely with our clients. So they don't even have to be in person. But we get amazing information that us as super users would not have allowed for when we were designing the project. But we get to validate it up front, and we can do everything all the way up to including voice feedback online as well. So here's another example from consumer and scheduling. But we're able to watch live in person or live remotely and see where it's not going right for our end users. And from there, we're able to iterate and move forwards. And the support teams are getting in on the act now as well. I've left. We have an initiative called Game Days, and our support team are actually inserting experiments into the live code to see what happens when a bad scenario happens, to actually validate that the code is working as expected. So at Cerner now, we've got upfront user research, we've got back-end analytics, and we're injecting scenarios into the code. It's pretty freaking cool. And just as a thought for everybody, but going back to minimum viable product, with all of the tools and advancements that now exist, your user experience and human factors team can actually implement the minimum viable product initiative on your solutions up front, because we can pretty much emulate it and test it and learn from it, and then those results over to the engineering teams, allowing them to move forwards with hopefully a higher degree of success. And to design quality, well, UX quality is measured by pixels and microtransactions. The smallest details can carry the most meaning. So another example from Epic Mickey here. But this is 20 seconds from the opening video of the game. And we wanted to show time passing. So we did it via a calendar. And as you can see, this goes by very, very quickly. So microtransactions. So I think we showed time passing there. But what you may not have noticed is that the calendar is actually telling a story within the opening movie. We chronologically took a screenshot from each of Mickey's cartoons from the past to tell the story of time. But we also, from those screenshots, we also show Mickey getting sadder and sadder in real time as he morphed from the 20s and 30s cartoon hero to today kind of a park icon, in Mickey Mouse Clubhouse just for the kids. And then further attention to detail, but the calendar date that it ends on is November 18th, which just happens to be Mickey's birthday as well. But this is the level of thought that goes into designers when making things. And to give you an exact example from our work at Cerner, so with one Cerner style, you can think of a button as just a button, but the designers have to think about how that button is going to look in the grand scheme of things in the whole one Cerner ecosystem. And they also have to accommodate and think about every way that that button is going to be interacted with as well. And they also have to keep close track of the colors that are being used across all of those components as well. Just on hex values alone, there's nearly 17 million color combinations that we use in our solutions. For anybody that uses a lot of Cerner solutions today, you might see blue a lot, but you're probably seeing different shades of blue. And in small doses, that doesn't make so much of a difference. But when it's happening all of the time, it's actually pretty distracting to the end user. And if that wasn't enough at the high level, the team are also responsible for technical design implementation as well, giving the engineers a very detailed breakdown of just exactly what they want the component to do, how it's going to work from an internationalization standpoint and a responsive design standpoint as well. Amber and Jen showed this earlier, but they've done that for Button. They've also done it for another 68 or so solutions already. And we're moving ever faster towards that kind of goal of unification of our solutions. Another element of design, this one a quote from Sam Walton, but exceed your customers' expectations. And if you do, they'll come back over and over. Give them what they want and a little more. And I have a direct example here from Donkey Kong Country 3. So this is 1996. And the requirement was that the user gets to save their game. And so we created, that could have been a menu, but we ended up creating a cave with Wrinkly Kong, and she can talk to you. And as designers, our tools were text, audio, one visual effect, and music and sound effects. And so to keep the variation going and keep the fun going, we had some fun with it. So not a lot of frames of animation, but nice and fun. Now, that was pretty cool, but also during this time, so Donkey Kong Country 3 came out the year that the PlayStation 1 and my favorite console of all time, the Nintendo 64, came out. And Nintendo said, hey, we'd like you guys to help market the Nintendo 64. And that is a very proud moment, especially as it's my first game as a designer. So we showed them the concept of what the saved cave is, and we said, hey, music is a thing. If we're advertising the N64, could you maybe give us some music? And that'll really help the authenticity. And so they did. So you may not have noticed that N64 in the screenshot, but once upon a while, you'll go in there and Wrinkly Kong is playing on the Nintendo 64, and that music might be familiar to you, because Nintendo actually gave us the music to the castle section of Mario 64. They did this before that game came out. Even we didn't know at the time, but when we realized, it was super cool. And I'm telling you this story 22 years after it happened, and not many people knew this then, and now you know. But all of it contributed to quality, and it's just those micro moments and kind of an obsession with every pixel and every sound effect and every moment that helps push your solutions further. We're doing this now with one Cerner style, so I think most people have seen the evolution of the patient portal to one Cerner style. And again, thanks to the consumer team. I think that's either the second or third thanks I've given you today. But we're moving ever further forwards, and we don't rest on our laurels. So here's just a quick evolution over the last year taking those kind of atomic components and then asking the question of how we can plus it without breaking the rules of the UI component libraries. And as you can see, it's getting better and better and not forcing rework from our end users. So it's a really exciting time, and we're really heading to something quite special over the course of the next few years. So point 4, adaptability. So this is kind of a big deal for me, because living in the world of design and project management, there are two words that I never want to hear or say, and that's well, phrases. But let's cut it. That's terrible, and no, we can't do that for X, Y, Z. What I prefer is adaptability. How can we work around a problem? So this is Extreme G. It was released on the Nintendo 64 by Acclaim, and for its time, it was a super cool game. You raced bikes at 300-400 miles an hour. They had a whole range of different bikes with different weapons and different statistics. So pretty neat. But we were on the second sequel, so Extreme G3, and Acclaim wanted us to do this game for the PlayStation 2. Now, the PlayStation 2 was way more powerful than Nintendo 64. So when it came to actually modeling the bikes, they wanted 6 different bikes, and each bike to fully model was going to be about 30 days of work, and we did not have 180 days of capacity. So without having the capacity, do we cut or do we adapt? And so we adapted, and we actually adapted the game fiction. So rather than it being this kind of game with lots of different bikes and different styles, we actually went the MotoGP route, or NASCAR, or stock racing. And as you can see, we were able to create different themes and looks for the bikes, giving them team colors and decals. So the bike on the right, that one took 30 days. The bike on the left, which looks similar but far different, actually took 5 days. And we were able to create our team without sacrificing any quality to the overall experience. So we took that concept and then plussed it out to a ridiculous level. So that's a screenshot from the game. And I just talked to you about the bikes, but we then did it with the track pieces. So the tracks were miles and miles long. So we didn't have the time to model unique and individual tracks, but we essentially created a kit, much like Scaletrix, of track pieces, which our designers were then able to put together to create these really cool long tracks. We didn't have the greatest budget for track pieces and things of interest, so we made sure that anything that we did have to build was placed very close to the track and very repeatable. We were very explicit about the worlds that these races occurred on, and made sure that the textures could be tiled, allowing us to take a desert or an ocean, for instance, and just use a few textures and have it go across the game world without any perceived loss in quality. And then we put our major kind of budget in the skybox, because the skybox in games, you're probably seeing in a first or a third-person game, it's taking up about 30 or 40% of the screen real estate while it does nothing. But it frames the entire experience, and that's why backgrounds are very important. So we put a lot into that. And so the end result of all of this work, you might say cutting corners, but I call it adaptability. That allowed us to get to this. And bearing in mind, that game was made in 2001. It's one of the few games on older consoles that actually runs at 60 frames a second, which, when we were making a game about could go at 300 or 400 miles an hour, was a major product requirement for us. So Extreme G3, behind Epic Mickey and Donkey Kong 3, is actually one of the games I'm most proud of, because we took something, made it super cool, partnered with Ministry of Sound. If you know Ministry of Sound, they're a dance music label. Storm Watches, We launched simultaneously on the PlayStation 2 and GameCube in Europe, America, and Japan. And we did that with 30 developers in 9 months, start to finish. Again, being adaptable is a key part of maximum value mindset. And that crosses over into the world of Cerner and what we do. One Cerner style is going to eventually eliminate a whole bunch of different front-end platforms that we're using today. Our design team currently have to learn all of those, and it's very time-consuming and prone to error. Tools such as Kaiju from the Terra team are actually speeding up the design process even further and allowing us to guarantee that we get to solutions that are going to look and behave well on tablets and mobile devices too. We increase that level of adaptability in conversations with our engineers. So these are a few of the effects that we wanted to get into one Cerner style. So blur, for instance, punch-out effect, font loading. And as you can see, we actually created a matrix. And the matrix is basically level of quality versus time and risk to implement. And we came to the table with multiple options for the engineering teams to think about, because we're also very conscious of their timelines and the technical restrictions that are in place as well. And all of this, from an adaptability standpoint, gives any future user guaranteed accessibility. So safe, legible, discernible solutions that meet the strictest of requirements, which is really important as we move into the world of supporting the Department of Defense, the VA, and Europe. So my last but one, but technology. This is really quite key to everything. Here's a few examples from the past. So at Rare, they were one of the first companies to invest heavily in 3D graphics, way before anybody else, and it gave Rare a market lead for about 6 years during the 90s. With Extreme G3, our graphic engineers found a white paper on a process called stripification rendering. So we were able to take the tracks that were built and actually find a way to remove the need to calculate all 3 vertices on the polygon. They were stripped together. That solution didn't work for my one other example here, Paris-Dakar Rally, where we had to model the Sahara Desert. Well, we found another white paper that allowed us to basically create the Sahara Desert using a bitmap. And finally, with Epic Mickey, which is an example of the sum of its parts, because we had paint and thinner, emergence, physics, multiplayer, AI, all having to work together to create one whole. And as anybody in software development knows, all of these things are being developed simultaneously, and it's kind of tough to make it all work at once. So where it comes, I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly, but technology is where Cerner shines. In putting this deck together, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people within Cerner, and I've learned a lot during that time, and I wanted to share that as we go. Starting with the patent wall in innovations, Cerner is currently at way over 300 patents in the world of healthcare, which is pretty remarkable. What's more remarkable to me is that PathNet came out in 1982. I was still a kid, which just shows how old I am now. But I had a ZX Spectrum with 48K of RAM, and the rich kids had a Commodore 64. And Cerner's already in the market selling solutions. I mean, that's pretty amazing. They were the first to think about integrating this healthcare into one system, starting with Classic back in '85. They were on top of the game, having to. It's kind of tough to put this. How awesome this is, but in the 80s, things just didn't exist. The internet was still about 5 years away. Email was 10 years away. Build systems, languages. Cerner's creating all of these through the 80s as they proceed. It's really quite extraordinary. They've been thinking about clinical decision support since the late 80s and rallying around patient safety as a concept. FarmNet, that first proof point of an integrated data model working. Not resting on their laurels, they then moved forward with the initiative of the original power chart in '92 and the Open Clinical Foundation. From there, more and more innovation. IntelliStrip, the first concept of a patient timeline. '94, Cerner Millennium begins. '96, the concept of PowerNote. 2000, analytics in solutions. The concept of CPOE, which you can see, call it early UX, but removing hours of work from the workflow to increase the user experience for our end users. Health Sentry, using public health reporting systems. Integrating devices with our solutions. Continuing the notion of clinical decision support and offering up more options. I'm going to run out of breath here. Taking on genomics in 2004. Build systems for end users. Full-on analytics integration starting in 2007. Discern Desktop, 2007, another leap forward in user experience, allowing clinicians to access the data quicker and more easily. Continuing the concept of hardware and creating our own hardware. More integration with solutions. Encode, starting in 2009, to tackle the concept of patient billing and codes. MPages, 2009. A continuation of that user experience. Linking up devices in every department, tackling the problem of dynamic documentation for end users, mobility in 2011. The list goes on and on. Again, user experience, taking PowerChart and making the investment for nearly 5 years to uplift it and bring it into alignment and modernizing it. Healthy registries coming to market in 2013. Cerner being one of the founding members of Commonwealth and introducing interoperability. Fully embracing open source. Fully embracing Smart on Fire. Moving to the cloud. Working towards patient benefits in terms of closed-loop referrals. Now optimizing the user experience for hardware devices as well as software. The introduction of OCS, cheap plug to UX. Patient timeline reimagined, and a continuation of the patient benefits in terms of prescription, price checking, and continuing the configuration of software. That was a very fast summing up of Cerner, but if you're an engineer here, take a bow. This is amazing. Blow my mind. Thank you. And with that, I'm closing with the most important thing for all of this, which is passion. And I found this quote from Steve Jobs, which is, "The only way to do great work is to love what you do." And I love what I do. I actually found somebody online who's recreated the first level I ever designed online. So I was able to take this, and what you're seeing over the top is a grid. And I basically had to put this level together with essentially a tile editor, which is a giant jigsaw. And to give you an idea and appreciation of the scope, every level that we created, there were usually about 40 ideas and 20 got thrown out. We took the 20 and then created an index card version of that map to scale. I personally created every one of the 48 levels for Donkey Kong Country 3 using that tile editor, which you can see there. And I got upgraded to a 14-inch monitor, which was pretty awesome during that time, too. As well as that, I also had to do command line scripting for all of the in-game events because we didn't have editors back then. I also did all of the dialogue and all of the RPG elements. And somehow, a team of 16 developers created Donkey Kong Country 3 in 11 months. I found that GIF, which seemed appropriate. And game development is really hard. I mean, the hours are crazy. There are technical challenges every day. It's a boom or bust industry. As soon as something goes wrong, you're done. And finding the fun is hard. I mean, really hard. We live 80% of our development timeline with the whole experience being kind of crap. And sometimes we ship crap because we're on a fixed deadline. But rather than thinking about games for a moment, let's think about passion manifesting itself in different ways. Doctors spend 11 to 15 years becoming a doctor, and then they have to commit to about 50 hours of training forever. And they're in the hole for anywhere from $180,000 to $300,000 of education debt, and they're going to be working 60 hours a week forever, having to make complex life or death decisions, and having a heavy administration burden. Doctors do not do it for the money. It is all about passion, and it is no different for nurses either, who go through a similar level of rigor with what they do. The key difference, I think, for nurses is that they are the nexus for coordinating care with, what I'll coldly call the end user, but in actual fact, the patient family, they are the rock for those people who are in the situation that they're in. I've showed you this picture before, but just as a reminder, none of us are going to escape health. We are all going to be in a hospital at some point in our lives. Our loved ones are going to be in hospitals at some point as well. And so those doctors and nurses are using our solutions today to help make the calculations and the life or death decisions that they do. We will continue to strive to minimize the amount of time that they have to do that so that they can re-engage with the patient, which is the most important thing. And so, utilizing my one Lord of the Rings token, as Tolkien put it, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. And that is all about passion. And frankly, to go along with the opening keynote, do not fear failure. I am not a fail cake person. I don't think you should ever celebrate failure, but you should never be punished for it, unless you do the same thing consistently. That's an HR problem. But you should always learn from it. And in closing, I wanted to tell the story of quality through cakes. So this is a fail cake. We can get to functional. It's a chocolate cake. We can get to reliable. I went to the shop and bought this cookie cutter cake. We can get to usable, and this is where, with really well-designed small components working in harmony together, I hope that sounds familiar, you can create kind of special things. And you can build on that into the world of convenience, taking all of that and then plussing it and doing really clever things with the tools that you have at your disposal. And that is the route to pleasurable, and hopefully you can push to meaningful. And yes, I think I mentioned this before, but that is my wedding cake from before, and I've already embarrassed myself once with a picture, so you're not having the full version of that. So in closing, and I'm a little over, I apologize, maximum value product mindset. Have a strong vision, use that with your roadmap, fully utilize design and user research, be adaptable in your thinking, embrace the awesome that is the technology of Cerner, and come to work with passion every day. And if you do that, you'll end up with maximum value products. Thank you very much.